Will you pray with me? Holy God, sometimes we wrestle with your word. Sometimes we hear it only with our heads. Sometimes it's hard to let it find its way to our hearts, much less to our bodies. Today, let us rest in your word. Let us rest in your presence. Let us rest in your grace and your goodness and your love that is unfailing. And now may the words of my mouth and the thoughts of all of our hearts bring us closer to you. Bring us closer to your rest. For you, O God, are our rock and our Redeemer. Let God's people say amen. Today we find ourselves at the crux of so many things. And the truth is, I wrote those words before I knew about this political shooting. Personally, many of us face continued challenges and uncertainties in our own lives. I am aware of challenges, uncertainties, and conflicts, in our congregational life. That's a normal part of being community together. We can be grateful beyond words, and this could have been its whole own sermon today, for the witness of our young people, for Brooklyn, for Kaylin and Colton, for Jasleen, for Lucas, on their mission trip to New Mexico. Grateful beyond words for their witness. It was a hard week. I didn't hear one complaint the whole time. And that's just the beginning of it. There's much to celebrate in terms of the ways in which we as a congregation are growing, thriving, living into God's extravagant welcome here and in the wider world. There's much to pray about in terms of how we can live even more fully and more deeply into God's call for us. And also, there is fear. And I wrote that yesterday too, before I knew about what was happening. We are afraid for ourselves, for our nation, for our world. The day after one of our presidential candidates was shot at, regardless of how we may feel about Donald Trump, we are afraid because violence begets more violence. We know that to be true. And as I said, the reality is that I was afraid before, and perhaps you've been feeling that too. Afraid for those of us and our siblings who are people of color. For those of us and our siblings who live with chronic illness and disability. For those of us and our siblings who are navigating new realities due to aging and declining health, right? For those of us and our siblings who farm and rely on the health of the environment for our living. I was afraid before for those of us and our siblings who are queer and trans. For those of us and our siblings who are artists, dreamers, visionaries, prophets, those whose hearts are so wide open and taking in all that is hurting and harmful in our world right now. I was afraid before for our children and our youth, for those from whom we are borrowing the earth. Yes, we are borrowing the earth from you. Thank you. We're not doing a great job caring for it real well. And now we are also afraid of escalating violence. For as I said before, violence begets violence. at the crux of all of this, of challenge, uncertainty, gratitude, and fear, I cannot help but hear the words of the man covered with a skin disease as he falls on his face at Jesus' feet, saying, "Lord, if you want. Lord, if you want, you can make me clean. Lord, if you want, you can heal me. Lord, if you want." True stories. As I first read this, I was looking at this story and simply seeing God at work fixing things. Also, true confessions. I kind of want God to do that right now. Yes, please. God, if you want, fix this mess. Please, fix this mess. It's easy to look at this story and simply see the divine working wonders and miracles. But I think there's an invitation to remember and hold something else as well. Our scriptures consistently depict Jesus as both divine and what? Human. Our tradition claims clearly again and again that Jesus was fully both, fully divine and fully human. And so I think the invitation for us today is to read this story with an eye to the human Jesus. The human Jesus approached by a man suffering, a man cast out from his community, cast out from his holy places, cast away from those traditions and practices that would connect him to God. Jesus, the human being, approached by a man isolated and exiled. And yet this man speaks boldly, "Lord, if you want, you can make me clean." It is a statement about healing, yes, but I think there's more to it than that. It's also a statement about connection, about reintegration into community. The man doesn't say, at least this translation of our scriptures does not tell us that he said, "Lord, if you want, you can make me well." He says, "You can make me clean. You can remove this stigma that isolates me. You can help me reintegrate into my community. You can help me return to my holy spaces." This is about relationship. That's what this man is asking for. In Albuquerque, Brooklyn, Kaylin, Colton, Jesseline, Lucas, Daniel, Noe, and I saw consistently the ways in which illness, poverty, and trauma have separated people from the wider functioning of society. The ways in which illness, poverty, and trauma have literally made people exiles, outcast from their own neighbors. And the invitation we heard over and over and over again was some version of, "If you want, you can be part of our wholeness, of our reintegration into community. You can be in relationship with us in such a way that it facilitates our relationship with our wider community. You can be part of our healing." Now, to be very clear, I don't necessarily mean a cure. True and deep healing, I believe, has less to do with fixing our bodies and more to do with connection, access, equity, and justice. Healing is grounded in relationship. If you want, you can heal our nation. If you want, you can heal the earth. If you want, you can end the genocide in Gaza. You can ensure that every child in the United States goes to bed satisfied, with a full belly and a safe place to live. You can protect queer and trans folks. You can be part of healing racial divides, the long-standing, unrepaired hurts of our nation. You can insist on the valuing and humanizing of our neighbors, children, elders, those living with mental illness, immigrants. You can make the world more inclusive, more accessible, more equitable to people living with chronic illness and disability, to our elders whose health is steadily declining. You can make our nation kinder, safer, more civil, just, a place where the common good matters. If you want. Of course, I want to jump in and say, I do want. I do want to. But then I take a step back and take a breath and try to be a little bit more honest. And I wonder, if I do want to, what is stopping me? If we do want to, what is stopping us? So often what stops us is some combination of fear, a sense of overwhelm, and exhaustion. Fear that the problems are too big and we too small. Fear about our own convenience. I'll tell you that's why I drive my car to work and don't ride my bike. Fear about how others will see us. Fear about swimming against the flow. And the reality is we fear being exiled also. I can't help but wonder, did the man, the human Jesus, fear that as he reached out his hand to touch the unclean man, did he fear that he might catch the skin disease? Did he fear that at the very least this makes him unclean? Did he fear for his own exclusion from community? The story doesn't tell us, but I wonder. And let's be real honest here. We also fear violence, right? And that's a fear based in reality. Our nation is one where violence is a reality in which we live, where violence is part of the history of how our nation was formed. The violence is the reality of so many of our neighbors navigating illness, trauma, poverty, and that violence disproportionately impacts our Black, brown, and Indigenous siblings. If you want, if you want, if we want, God's beloved, today, my prayer for us, my prayer for myself and for you and for our nation's leaders is that we will have the courage to respond not just with our words, but with our actions, as Jesus did, I do want to. My prayer is that when we work to reintegrate our sibling, to make a place for them alongside us, like Jesus, we will not do so for our own gain. We will not do so for our own power or fame or glory, but to reestablish right relationship. to make room for return, for restoration. That's what Jesus does, right? He says, don't tell anyone about me. That's not what this is about. This is about going back to your sacred space and being found whole, being reintegrated. That is your testimony. And God's beloved, my prayer is that in the midst of this work, in the midst of the work of love, in the midst of the work of healing, in the midst of the work of reintegration, of peace making and justice tending, we will also rest. Like Jesus in this story. We will withdraw to deserted places, whether those are in the mountains or at a lake or in our own hearts. We will withdraw to those deserted places to pray. We will lean not into our own wells of strength, for we know those will quickly dry up, but that instead we will dip from the wells of the divine, where softness and strength, vulnerability and courage, love and peace spring eternal. In the words of the poet, Amanda Gorman, may we not just grieve but give. May we not just ache but act. May our signed right to bear arms never blind our sight from shared harm. May we choose our children over chaos. May another innocent never be lost. Maybe everything hurts, our hearts shadowed and strange, but only when everything hurts, may everything change. If you want, I do want to. We do want to. God help us. May it be so. Amen.